everyone. Welcome to IPP's August Lunch and Learn. Today, we will be talking about families left behind, the ripples effect of incarceration. My name is Gigi. I am one of right now, one of the current only community navigator right now. Shout out to Anaviel. So we decided to do this lunch and learn. To tell the stories of families of incarcerated people. When a person is incarcerated, the punishment does not stop at the prison gates. It ripples outwards, touching everyone who loves them. Children lose parents, partners lose companions, and parents lose their sons and daughters, often without warning or preparation. Families are left navigating an emotional minefield of grief, anxiety, and uncertainty while shuttering the heavy financial burdens of legal fees, lost income, travel costs, and the steep prices of staying connected through phone calls and visits. These separations can fracture family bonds, reshape identities, and leave lasting scars that span generations. Today, you will hear from some family members who were impacted by the removal of their parents or loved ones by incarceration. I myself served almost a decade in the Illinois Department of Corrections, and I can honestly say that you truly don't know the impact your presence has on your family and friends until you are observing it from a jail cell. I watched my family be torn apart by my incarceration at just 21. I would not have thought I was the glue that held my family together. And trust me, people had no problem telling me that the effects my incarceration had on them. There's no real preparation families have once their loved ones are taken away, not mentally, physically, emotionally, or financially. This burden comes with so many obstacles that only the family members and loved ones can attest to, like our panelists. So, I hope with this panel today that we educate the community and advocates and policymakers about the ripple effects of incarceration. We are going to explore how systemic barriers deepen that harm. We want them to understand that incarceration doesn't just impact the person behind bars, but it reshapes the lives of everyone who loves them. And I will let my panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Julie.
Thank you to IPP for having me for hosting this. I often feel that loved ones that are left behind are kind of like the forgotten victims in the whole criminal justice system. My name is Julie Anderson. I'm currently the outreach director at Restore Justice, and I got involved with this work because my son Eric, at the age of 15, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I'll just fast forward. He was able to get out through a U.S. Supreme Court decision called Miller v. Alabama, but he ultimately did 27 and a half years. Some of the most important formative years of his life he did in prison. And this changed the way I look at a whole lot of things. I won't say too much because you have other panelists.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Shout out to Eric and Darius. Can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Darius Bangs. I was impacted because my mom and dad was incarcerated, and I just wanted to speak from my heart.
Thank you. And Yolanda, please.
Thank you, IPP, for inviting me. Thank you, Gigi, for listening.
Absolutely.
I was invited here due to the fact that my husband served 32 years, and he'll tell you some months and some days in prison. And his sentence was computed by Governor Pritzker. And it's a few things that are involved with that. We dated prior to him being incarcerated. So, to see him back in society now is a totally different person than where he was, of course, 32 years ago, not only by age, but I mean, by personality and who he is. Okay. But I have seen that I have noticed, his family members were gravely impacted, his close family, like his nieces, his sister, and just as though you said, Gigi, he was one of the persons that I think kind of was a big part of that held his family together as well. So with him missing, I think that disrupted a lot of his family's lives. That's about it,
Thank
including myself.
you. Yes, as we all know. So the first question, we'll start with Darius. Can you share your personal journey and how your mother's incarceration first impacted your family?
My mom was incarcerated when I was 5, and my dad already left when I was 6 months old. I was raised by my grandfather, who I already finished raising his kids, so it was a big burden when I came to live with him. Money was tight, and I often wore hand-me-downs, unlike when I lived with my mom. Over time, my family's attitude changed towards me. They blamed me for things and rarely took accountability for their own mistakes.
Whew, yeah. That's how it goes, I guess. In that aspect. Julie, you mind sharing?
Oh, sure. When Eric was first incarcerated, I will say that I had no idea how to navigate anything. Um, and there were no resources. This is 1995 when he first went in, and I think there's more things available now, but at the time, and even still, I didn't know how do you visit him. I had no idea how the courts worked. I didn't know what an arraignment was. I didn't know how to show up or what was expected. And I will say um, that was um, that was devastating. It was devastating every single moment. Never ever got easier. And even now, I think when we have a hot day, it just breaks my heart to think of everyone who's behind bars. And when my
Yeah.
son was in there, you feel guilty like about everything. You feel guilty about going on vacation. You feel guilty sleeping in clean sheets. You feel guilty with air conditioning. And I will say also as a mother, um, there was an extreme amount of guilt and shame involved in failing as one of the most important jobs you could have. I just to be able to share that story about Eric was so intimidating to me. I just kind of wanted to hang my head and close the door and not go out. It was a tough journey, and it still is, even though he's home now. Sadly, incarceration doesn't stop at the gate.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Yolanda, would you like to share your perspective?
Well, I kind of can agree with what Julie said, as far as like knowing how the system actually works. I had no clue on that either when Vincent was first arrested. I didn't know what an arraignment was as well. I didn't know the pure discomfort you get when you go visit someone in there, what you go through. You feel like you're incarcerated. Um, you feel violated. It was just a very uneasy feeling going inside those gates. And just for me to purely hear the gates or the gates close was like a real scary feeling. And so just to know that you actually have to live behind there, at least I get to go home when I visit.
Right.
So it was just a very, very uneasy feeling and something that you don't wish on anybody, honestly.
That's so true. So keeping it right there. What were some of the most immediate emotional challenges you or your family faced when your loved ones was incarcerated? And I'll start with Darius since you already unmuted.
One of the biggest challenges me and my family faced was dealing with depression. For me, it was something that came and went and didn't came and went in a few days or weeks. It stayed with me for years. I carried the weight of sadness and confusion without really knowing how to let it out. I was never given the space or the opportunity to truly vent or talk about what I was going through. So I kept everything bottled inside me. Over time, that silence made the depression even heavier, and it shaped the way I experienced my childhood and relationships with those around me.
Okay, I'm okay. This is so um okay, Yolanda.
Yeah, the challenges that I had when Vincent first went in, when he first got in trouble, it goes back to a little bit what Julie said. It was a lot of embarrassment there. Not to mention because at the time we actually lived together. Okay. So it was a lot of embarrassment there. And then it was a lot of I went through a lot with the neighborhood people in the neighborhood. Once they found out what had happened, they were coming at me kind of crazy. Like, I was hearing it, I knew about it, I was involved with it. I was treated differently than from people in the neighborhood because of what took place. So I embodied a lot of that type of grief. Yeah.
Got it. Which is unfair.
Yeah.
Julie.
Um, I would say one of the immediate things was, first off, it was very humbling to be there. My case was kind of supercharged because I am a white person and my husband was a Chicago police officer. So that compounded to make it a great news story.
Mm,
So suddenly I have, like reporters on my doorstep, they're on my neighbor's doorstep. The there were 6 other kids involved, so there was a bunch of co-defendants. Um, and like to even walk out of the front door
yeah,
was just a really challenging thing, and to go to court. And I didn't realize this, again, it was, even though my husband was a policeman, we never navigated this, right? So court, you have court all the time. And you have to take off of work and you have to go there. And every time you go to court, I would find myself like, because they make sure that you don't get any good parking spots or anything when you go to court, right? Like other people get that, and you kind of get the farthest away maybe you could find a parking spot.
mhm,
And you get to go in the big long line, and so it's really emotionally traumatic. It's traumatizing every time you go into court, and you go for a couple of years every month for no reason. And sometimes you would get there, you take off work, and the judge wouldn't even be there.
yep,
And the prosecutors would tell the other side, or you'd have to go in there and sit on one side and hang your head and look at those people that, were caused tremendous amount of harm. And so emotionally it was terrible. And as I would walk to court, I can just still feel myself, my steps would get slower and slower and slower. Like, I don't even want to go in here because
yeah,
it's such a the Cook County Courthouse is a terrible, terrible place. Like, there's nobody happy there, right? Maybe the prosecutors are, I don't know, but everybody else on both sides of that courtroom
mhm,
are devastated. And it's just, so it's just really tough. And and every single month you do that, for a couple of years. And you know the best you can hope for is like nothing.
yeah,
Really, there's no, like attorneys kind of like, hey, he's going out for life. That's going to be it. So emotionally, I'll just say it was super traumatizing.
yeah,
I agree with you, Julie. I think it's like beyond, it's not only is it traumatizing, it's like when you go in there before your case is called, you got to sit there and listen to other people cases being called ahead of time and hearing their stories and seeing their families and the other people family. It's like it's really a horrible place to be. Cook County Courthouse is truly horrible. I'm not kidding.
oh,
And you do see um it's very few court cases that you go inside of that you see that the attorneys are actually there to actually help, you
yes,
know? So that also is very discouraging at the going inside. Yes.
mm,
Sorry.
Yeah.
As one who sat through it, I would agree on both sides.
Yeah.
It's traumatic on both sides.
I'm going to say it's paralyzing, actually, in so many ways. You sometimes, you just don't want to. And I'd say the only thing that keeps you going is if somebody you love is involved in that, then you have to keep going for them
Yeah,
because you're like, if I disappear off the face of the earth, I don't know what'll happen to them, but it can be paralyzing.
absolutely. Okay. You getting me again, Julie. She used to do this when I worked with her. Okay, so what has been the hardest part about maintaining your relationship, whether it's your husband or your child or your mom, through incarceration? So while they were incarcerated, what would you say was the hardest part about maintaining a relationship?
The hardest part about maintaining a relationship during incarceration was the 20-minute phone calls. No matter how much I wanted to say, the time always slipped away faster than when I could speak. 20 minutes felt like seconds, and the abrupt ending of each call left me with words still trapped in my throat. Yet, despite the brevity, those calls became a highlight of my days. I counted down the hours until I can dial her number, knowing that even a short conversation would bring me a peace of home. Hearing my mom's voice gave me a sense of comfort and strength when everything around me felt cold and unfamiliar. She had a way of making me feel grounded, reminding me of who I was beyond the walls and the bars. Even when I felt lost, her voice was a lifeline, pulling me back towards the hope and reminding me that I wasn't alone in the struggle.
Okay. Mm. Yolanda, you did so good. Yolanda.
Oh, Darius, that was very, very well said. What I can say, I really don't have a lot to say on that part of this because after Vincent was completed his trial and he went inside to prison, I we maintained a relationship for about 2 years after that, and from that point we would write, and
Mm,
then writing became less and less and less, and then it became holidays,
mm,
birthdays,
right.
um and so then it became when you lost members of your family that were close to you, you know so it kind of went away like that. That's how that started. And then upon knowing that, I would get calls from Kent College saying that they would ask me questions as the years went on, trying to help him get out. you
Mm,
know they asked me, questions like, would I be helpful in things? And it was always yes, of course, but nothing actually became of that. So we kind of like lost touch with each other for a while. Again, it would be like maybe Christmas
right.
a year, twice a year. So, you
Right.
know, by that part time, I was keeping up with his family more so than him, to see how they were, to know what was going on in their lives. Found out he lost his brother, and I could only imagine how he was feeling with that. And then later on down the line, he lost his sister, and that's the sad part because they're behind those bars and um they can't mourn correctly, you
Yeah.
know, when
Yeah.
they lose somebody. They have no way of mourning with their family or letting them. They can tell them and show them when they visit, and support, but what about them? They need to talk to somebody as well when situations, things like that should happen. And it's a part of life, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's their life, it's
Absolutely.
their family members and their loved ones that they need to be around. And So I think that's a hard part of it, of the whole thing. Because now that he's home, it's like he has to pick up a
Right.
lot of stuff that he lost out on, and try to help his family members that were torn apart due to losing family members, you know. So it's a lot. Hmm.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, I'm going to say that the Illinois Department of Corrections was the hardest part of maintaining a relationship, be it limited visiting, lockdowns, canceling visits, dropping phone calls. Phone calls when Eric first went in cost like $15 to $20 a call for the first 3 minutes. And those calls would drop after 3 minutes, and then they'd call back and it'd be another $15. Financially, it was a big drain. And then driving down to Menard, 6.5 hours from my house to be turned around and told you're on lockdown. The barriers, and we won't even go into the way you're treated when you walk in there. And everyone is treated just horrifically. My daughter is 13 years younger than Eric, and so she was young. And when I would take her, that's super frowned upon by correctional officers. Why would you bring a child in here? And the response would be, why would you make this an atmosphere where I shouldn't bring a child? Right? Um, so I can see, like as a mom, I always felt like I had no choice, right? Because I could see otherwise. Um, yeah, a lot of my family members, like it has a big wedge because there's the people who visited and maintained contact, and there's the people who didn't, and and it's really hard for people. I try to be forgiving of that because seeing someone, for instance, Eric was young, so he did some seg time, and when you're in seg, you're brought out in handcuffs, not handcuffs like this, but these things. I don't know
Mhm.
what you call that thing, but they're cuffed and they're strapped to the floor, and it's so uncomfortable, and that's that's unbelievably upsetting as a mom. The first time I saw him like that, I just burst into tears. I thought, oh my God, what are they doing? He's 18 years old and he weighs 110 pounds. So, and then you're scared all the time. On Eric's 17th birthday, he was in temporary juvenile because he was 15 when he was arrested. So 15 to 17, he was in the juvenile detention center. For his 17th birthday, his gift was a trip over to Cook County Jail. And I was terrified. I was just terrified to think of him in there. And you're just terrified all the time. I still get calls from moms when their kids first get picked up and they're so afraid of what's going to happen. So fear is big too.
Absolutely. I can probably attest to everything y'all said in some way, shape, or form. I lost my grandmother while I was incarcerated. And because she didn't raise me, I couldn't go to the funeral. And this was my grandmother. And so I had to navigate that alone. And, even the visits, like I can attest to my family being treated poorly or being turned around because my little brother had on shorts and or sweats, and it's like he's a kid. And just thinking of all of the obstacles that we're inside, so it's a guilt as well for us because we feel bad that you all have to go through it, and then we have to go back and feel like crap because we like, man, if I wasn't in here they wouldn't be going through this. So it's a big cycle of trauma. And so I can't relate in the aspect, but I also have family who's done a substantial amount of time. So even though, I did time myself, I also have been the one doing time with someone. So even though I was younger, but it's all the same, no matter how old you are, what role you play. Um, and so I feel like Darius kind of touched on the next question. But How would you say that phone calls and mail or visitation policies shape your ability to stay connected? And Julie touched on this as well too.
They shape my ability to stay connected by limiting the ways I can reach out, but also making each interaction more meaningful. The short 20-minute phone calls often felt too brief, but they gave me the comfort of hearing my mom's voice and reminded me that I wasn't alone. Mail provided a slower but a deeper connection. Writing letters gave me space to express myself in detail, and receiving one back felt like I was receiving a piece of home I can hold on to. Visitation, though restricted and sometimes difficult to arrange, gave me the strongest sense of closeness. Even brief face to face contact helped me feel grounded and gave me hope for the future. Altogether, these policies shaped my ability to stay connected by teaching me to value every moment of communication and to hold on unto the smallest gestures of love and support.
Oh, your mommy will be proud of that answer. Julie, I know you're gonna have a slightly different approach.
No, I want to say, phone calls are tough. They used to be 30 minutes, then they shortened them to 20 minutes. Hopefully they'll go back someday to 30. When they made them cheaper, they shortened them, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'd always feel like you'd get over the little bit of like, how you doing? How's this? And that takes like about 8 minutes, right? So then you get into the real deep, like you're in a conversation and boom, the call's over, right?
Yeah.
Because it takes a few minutes to get. I always felt that way about visiting too.
Yeah.
We get in, how's the weather? Who's doing this? And then you just get into the really, talking and, feeling it, and boom, the visit was over. But I'll say visits, and this is something people, uh, especially young people on the outside, can't get. Visits are 4 hours, right? And it's 4 hours of no TV, no cell phone, no nothing except each other in a conversation. And that I think was amazing. And bringing my kids to that taught them that art of communication, of how to actually have a conversation with someone. And I always try to, there's so much bad stuff. You always try to look at like, what's one little tiny good thing one golden nugget we can take. And that truly is, my children are very gifted at just having a conversation. And I think it's because of all of those visits when you could just sit there and really talk about things and get into really deep, kind of mind things and stuff like that. Like we didn't play games or anything like that. And that feeling like when I'd bring the kids down, or it'd be me, my husband, and one of our kids, because we're a family of four, so we couldn't all visit because can only have four people. But when we'd go down there and we'd get a sandwich and a pop, and you just kind of tune out the rest of the visiting room, and you could have this brief little time of feeling normal, of feeling like a family. And that to me was what got me through. And I think it's what got Eric through.
Yeah. Well, I know yours was slightly probably a little different, Yolanda, but you still were in communication with him, so I'm sure you can still answer the question.
Oh yeah. Well, it was a burden on like the family, per se, from the phone calls, because when Vincent went in, and which was like 1988, the phone calls was $30. And they couldn't pay for it, so you had to accept the collect call, and you paid for those calls. So that put the family in a financial burden as far as, calls. So you didn't get calls as often, you know what I'm saying? Because they were so expensive. Um, and
I
again,
just want to add real quick because you made me think of that. And you had to keep your landline.
and you had to have a
It
landline.
wouldn't do
Exactly.
collect calls to the cell phone. So I had
Absolutely.
to keep this extra landline for years. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and not to mention, just like Julie said about the kids coming in, like, his nieces and nephews would come and visit, and that was a great time for them to actually have a family time, Um, he got to learn a lot about them growing up, and they would really have great conversations then, better conversations then than they do now as an adults, trust me.
Yeah.
But they bonded over a lot of things. And then when he would call, they would ask him questions or tell him things that they had spoke about that they asked about. So, he it was a quite a different time in 1988, of course, when he went in, and the way things were set up and the visits and the long rides, as Julie mentioned, going to different prisons, and you kind of went from this prison to that prison to this prison. So that was a lot within itself. And Menard's so far down the road, as she said,
Yeah.
that's a 6 hour ride. And I just felt like there was some kind of way that they could inform you when it's a lockdown prior to somebody having to drive all the way down there or something, like she said, and find out it's a lockdown, and then you got to turn around and go 6 hours right back. I mean, that's crazy to me.
Absolutely. I definitely can attest to a lot of that. The phone calls, the mail, the visits is what made my bid. It's what kept me going. I actually even had an uncle who did 18 years. He was just getting out of his bid when I went in. And so we really didn't know each other. And I can honestly say it was the best relationship I built through visitation. And just him coming, he like, you don't know me, but you'll get to know me. And he came and he would stay off. Now that was the one difference in Decatur and Logan. Like if the visiting rooms weren't packed, you could visit longer. And so he would try to come on the weekdays where we know people wouldn't be there and we get to hang out all day. And we would talk. And I think it's gotten me now that I'm home. I do not like talking on the phone. I prefer face to face because I've talked on the phone for almost 9 years. Like, come pull up on me. That's how I feel. Like, don't call me, pull up on me. So I definitely understand that. So from your experience of doing incarceration with someone from the outside, what do you think, what changes would make visits and communication more accessible for families? Okay.
In
Whoever.
my experience, visits and communication would be more accessible to family if the costs and restrictions were reduced. Phone calls are often expensive and too short, which makes it hard for families to stay in touch consistently. Lowering the prices of calls or extending the time limit would allow for more meaningful conversations. Mail should be processed more quickly without unnecessary delays, since letters are sometimes the only steady way people can communicate. As visitation, transportation, and scheduling are often big challenges for families. More flexible visiting hours, less restrictive policies, and support for families traveling long distance would make a huge difference. Overall, making communication more affordable, reliable, and family friendly would strengthen the connections and ease some of that emotional burden that incarceration places on loved ones.
I agree. 1000%. Yolanda?
The amount of the phone calls now are less to make. I mean, that's one thing that they've done. But I think that they could do better with allowing you, instead of you having to go there all the time, why not allow them to do like we're doing right now on
Like video visits?
video visits.
Hmm.
They should be able to do that at least 2 to 3 times a week. I mean, even if it's only 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes.
They have that now.
They do.
Yeah.
And you can do it anytime you get ready.
No. Of course not.
Mm-mm.
What? Girl, we talking about the IDOC.
Okay. And another thing I thought about when we were talking about the visits, maybe perhaps they should get rid of those vending machines inside of the visiting rooms, because it might be a little bit more cozier if were able to like bring a lunch and y'all could have lunch together
Okay.
or
I was gonna
something.
say what? With
No, no, no,
I like how you changed that up. I was
no.
just my take.
So you could bring lunch and you could have a lunch together as a family, so to speak, versus going and spending all that money on those vending machines. Because those vending machines are quite expensive, okay? But
Yeah.
if you could just bring a little box lunch and they check to see you got a lunch, then it'll feel more round table, family discussions, you could
Right.
talk about some things. I I think it would be a little bit better for him like that. That's all.
Okay.
Sorry.
Julie.
Oh, you know I have a list.
I noticed your
Oh, you know I do. We'll start with the video visits. They make it so difficult right now to register for them. They listen in on every minute. They need to have them more accessible. They need to cost less. They need to be longer. They need to put them on their tablets
Yes.
so that they don't have to go into the visiting room and
Ab-
be escorted. They all have these tablets now. That technology, they have the capabilities to do it. Should be done. Communication with your family is so important. Phones on the tablets so people can call. They can have limits, like you can have two 30-minute calls a day or whatever that is, but they should all be able to make a call. Right now, they have only two or three phones in the day room. If you're on lockdown, you don't get to the phones. It's just really difficult for people. People have been killed over the phones, and they know that. Fighting over the phones. It's a big thing. That phones need to be accessible. The email that they have, or whatever they want to call it, texting, email, needs to be quicker. It needs to, they need to get it. They won't do it immediately now, but it should be by within 12 hours, I think.
Absolutely.
I liked it immediately. They allowed that for by accident for a little bit. Um, and they need to keep real physical mail. They're trying to do scanning on real physical mail. And that means, Darius, your mom was in there. If you wouldn't be able to send her your report card. I
Mm,
mean, parents are in there. People pass away. Why can't you send them a mass card? Aside from just letters, there's so many important documents that can't come through on a computer scan on a tablet. That's not they people need mail. They need to really hold it. And when they are on lockdown, they need to be able to pull those things out and hold them. Visits. Oh, you have to register. You have to be at a certain place at a certain time. For instance, Pickneyville, very dear friend of mine is there. It's 5 hours away from me. The first visit's at 8:30 in the morning. So they don't decide if they're going to run visits till 7 a.m. So I have to leave at 3 in the morning and drive and hope by 7 that they're not going to cancel it. I mean, that's absolutely ludicrous. You should
yeah.
be allowed to visit when you get there. And they shouldn't make like they did at Logan at one time is if the visiting room is empty, let people stay. I
Absolutely.
get it if people are waiting to come in, but
Absolutely.
if not, people should be able to stay. And as far as the vending machines, I don't see him ever allowing us to bring food in. Oh my gosh. Although when Eric was first in juvenile detention, you could. You could
Mhm.
bring fruit and candy, but I will say lower the cost instead of price gouging. It's ridiculous what they charge.
Mhm.
Um, so those are just a few of my,
A few of
my thoughts. Not that I've thought about it at all.
I knew you'd have a list for that one, Jules. I agree with everything you all are saying. It's definitely they do have the technology capabilities and they don't use them. Um, Now that they are able to, I think that would help a lot. I know during COVID, I maybe talked to my family once or twice a week. And I had a tablet and could, do the video visits. It was just they would not provide them. So there are so many things I could say about communication and what would make it more accessible. But all the rules and restrictions, as we know, IDLC has makes everything impossible and harder. It's like that's what they want because they know the value that they have, and I think they see most people who have constant communication with their families who come a lot more, they typically come out on a better, ground because they had this. And everybody's not afforded that. And because of these reasons. Some people can't come, some people live too far, some people ain't getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They like, no. That's like crazy. So thank you for your dedication, Julie, because everybody, I probably ain't even willing to do 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'll ask the last question. And if everybody can, we kind of pressed on time. So if everybody can take like a minute and a half to answer this. If you could send one message to policymakers or the public about the real cost of incarceration for families, what would it be?
I, if I could send one message to policymakers or the public, it would be that incarceration punishes families too. Phone calls, visits, and mail are costly and limited, making it hard to stay connected. These barriers just don't affect the person inside. They place an emotional and financial burden on loved ones. Supporting family connections should be seen as essential, not as a privilege.
Mm, I clock that. Yolanda.
Well, I kind of agree. I do agree with what Darius says, but I would say for the policymakers, to actually do what the Constitution say. Um, um, you know, restore justice, restore people to justice. I just think that's what they should do. Um, so that it doesn't make the family feel incarcerated as well. And just to help restore people to useful citizenship, period. And it doesn't take 30, 20, and 30 years to do that, you know? So,
Absolutely not. I agree.
mhm.
And I would say that most people eventually are who are in the Department of Corrections are coming home. Communication with their families is vital. It's helps them make a smoother transition into society and become productive members of society. And I would also ask you to quit villainizing family members and the criticisms they need to take seriously some of their staff and the way that I've seen them treat people. It's it's absolutely wrong. The person coming in to visit, your only crime is you love someone who's in prison, and to openly criticize their clothing and their hair and nitpick on, this child turned 12 2 days ago and they don't have an ID and they should do everything in their power when that person, loved one, shows up to visit. They should be made to do everything in their power to make that visit happen, rather than the way it is now. They do everything in their power to turn you away, right? And I would ask them to invest in the people inside because eventually that investment will pay off when they come out. If they invest in programming, it's going to pay off to all of us when they come out, and especially their families when they welcome them home, that they'll be ready to join society.
Absolutely. I would agree. I guess my one plea to them would just be to make, if we have to have prisons, make them rehab centers as opposed to, prisons and trying to, tear communities apart, send people to prison and really or to rehab centers and allow them to get the real help that they need because some people, as we all know, never had a first chance depending on the family you were born into, depending on the circumstances you were born into, you've never really had a real first chance. And I think there are a lot of people in prison with a real chance who can do some really amazing things. And so that will be my ask is just to really focus on more rehabilitation in prisons as opposed to punishment. Because all of us at some point by the grace of God, will be coming home to communities, to these people who treat us like we don't matter. And then it's like, I could be your doctor. I could be your nurse one day. I could be the person that comes in and take care of your mother. Like, that's something to think about, when you mistreating people just because they've been in prison. And families, because, it's the same thing. It's no different. I know my mom has hell-bent hatred against some people who have harmed me just simply because she has felt the repercussions of it. And so and I feel her, right? I can't negate that, even though I'm like, well, it's their job. That's, now that I'm in this space, I understand that. But as a as a impacted family member, it don't matter. You know, you just like, no, you hurt my family and I don't like you. And, you know, it's just I think prisons should be more focused on rehab IDLC should focus more on rehabilitating people when they feel that they have done crimes against society or against other people. They should focus on the why and what happened as opposed to just we need to lock somebody up. Somebody needs to go down for this. No matter if they are a child or you know what's the word I'm looking for or a victim. We have domestic violence victims in prison. You know, that we have survivors of, you know, attacks and all type of stuff that get punished for surviving and defending themselves and their children. So, Darius being one. So, you know, it's all unfair. It's not dedicated to humans. It's dedicated to just punishment and breaking communities. And so I thank you all for taking time to do this today. And I thought everything that you all said was very heartfelt and very raw and real. And if it's anything anybody would like to add before we end, please do so now.
I want to thank Darius and Yolanda for being such great panel partners. um, I've been on a lot of panels, and this was really good. So thank you. Thank you for your input. And I want to thank Gigi for being an awesome moderator.
Always. We ask that you support families impacted by incarceration on both a personal and systemic level. Start by showing up for the people in your own community. Offer a ride to prison visit, help with childcare, or simply just be a listening ear. Then take that compassion to the policy level. Contact your state legislators, demand reforms that make visitation more accessible, and invest in family centered reentry programs. Together, small acts of care and bold calls for change can keep families whole. Please do not wait for this issue to personally impact you before you realize the impact it has on families and communities. This isn't a personal issue, it's a community issue. Every time a family is ripped apart by incarceration. This conversation directly connects to our Thawing Out Preparing for Transition Toolkit. This toolkit is a guide for people leaving prison after an extended period of incarceration. It addresses the emotional, social, and relational adjustments required to re-enter society. It provides tools, strategies, and guidance for navigating society, all aimed at supporting a healthy transition back into community life. It covers how incarceration and release affect family roles, trust, and communication. The toolkit talks about the dependency created in prison, that how it can spill into the home during reentry, creating challenges for autonomy and balance. It also talks about how both the returning person and their loved ones must process unhealed trauma, shifting expectations, and a reality that has changed over time. This toolkit can help families prepare for reentry together by understanding what their loved one experienced in the first days and weeks after release. Families can avoid common misunderstandings about how easy or instant reentry might be. It can also improve communication by using self awareness and relationship management tools to rebuild trust and maintain boundaries. Thank you so much for joining us for another IPP Lunch and Learn.